Welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by Jehovah's Witnesses that they are living in a modern day spiritual paradise hosted by the governing body. I am your host of this crazy show, former elder, ministerial servant, and a kid raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the 70s and 80s. As I do, just a quick warning, we try to have some fun here. We try to heal. Sarcasm, humor, experiences, and observations never meant to offend. Thanks for joining us. I want to begin this week with a confession. I am very guilty of waxing nostalgic on this crazy little show. I know. I guess that comes with age, and I'm getting there. I drop a lot of references weekly that refer back to pop culture, events, music, sports, and more from my own childhood or my own young adulthood. Guilty as charged. I know I do it. As an example, if I hear the theme of Love Boat, I'm singing along. I still know all the words. I can't be alone. Somebody jump in. I can still do the hand signals for Prince's I Would Die For You. Who remembers those? And I can even tell you the stats from most NFL players going back several years. Comes with age, nostalgia. But more than anything, I want to confess to missing a time when we didn't have cell phones. Does anybody remember that? If you wanted to tell a girl you liked her, you wrote a note. You hand wrote it. I know it sounds novel. And you passed it to her in the hallway at school. Texting? Nah, didn't exist. The internet didn't exist. Social media was a term none of us had ever heard of before. Back in the day when I was raised, and I'm not afraid to say I miss it, people lived in the moment and never felt the need to film everything happening. I got to film this. Meanwhile, missing the enjoyment of a once-in-a-lifetime experience, just being present. And seriously, don't get me going on music. Don't get me going on music of yesterday versus today, when we didn't have auto-tune and all the top songs on the radio weren't just covers of our music from back in the day. It's going on a lot these days. I think nostalgia and memories are very important. And as it turns out, I'm not alone in feeling that way. According to WebMD.com, Dr. Sheikh from April 2024 had this to say about nostalgia. Bear with me for a moment as I read this. Quote, nostalgia renews appreciation for the past and sparks hopefulness for the future, making it a valuable psychological resource. Despite nostalgia's inherent focus on past events, it actually provides fuel for the future. Nostalgia triggers emotions, behaviors, and goals that can positively impact these parts of your life. And it goes on to list a couple parts. Here we go. Quote, emotions. Nostalgia can result in a bevy of positive emotional states, including increased optimism and inspiration, boosted self-esteem, and feelings of purpose and youthfulness. Nostalgia can also provide a restorative outlet in uncertain, stressful, or overwhelming situations. End quote. Guilty as charged. I know that I tap into that piece of nostalgia, memories, and reminiscing when times are stressful. Guilty. But she continues, quote, behavior. Nostalgia can be an effective motivator, both inspiring you and driving you to act on that inspiration. For instance, one study found that nostalgia-induced optimism about physical health resulted in increased physical activity. Another study, after citing nostalgia as a primary coping mechanism during the COVID-19 pandemic, found that it's also fueling a resurgence in post-pandemic leisure travel. She continues, quote, social cognition. Nostalgia can encourage you to solve interpersonal issues, reconnect with old friends, and prioritize the important relationships in your life. Overall, nostalgia serves to strengthen feelings of social connectedness that are vital to the human experience. And then finally, she wraps up with, quote, creativity. Studies have found that nostalgia fosters creativity. People who took part in one study produced more creative prose in writing when having nostalgia. Openness to experience determined nostalgia's influence on their creativity levels. At healthy levels, it's clear that nostalgia has psychological and physical health benefits. Nostalgia generally offers emotional, behavioral, and social benefits, including more optimism, motivation, and creativity. End quote. Thank you to the good doctor for giving us an overview on nostalgia. But with all of that considered from a mental and physical health professional, apparently none of that is true when you're a Jehovah's Witness. And I know that shocks everybody. Not at all. I'm not sure this qualifies as new light, but the message that nostalgia isn't good for you is currently featured on their website in a talk by Brother Jonathan Smith entitled Better Days Ahead. And it's based on Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and verse 10, which says the following, and I'm going to read it so you have this in mind as we visit today. Quote, "Do not say, 'Why were the former days better than these?' For it is not out of wisdom that you ask this." End quote. Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and verse 10. And as the case with Jehovah's Witness leadership, they lift a couple of sentences out of the Holy Book and they build an entire teaching, doctrine, set of counsels, or commands around it. Most veterans of Jehovah's organization will remember that this verse comes to us from the same chapter of the Bible that tells us that the day of death is better than the day of birth. Also, an important side point here: Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate birthdays. They're evil. Those little parties where you honor a kid and make them feel special, absolutely terrible. But despite claiming death is better than birth, they don't celebrate death either. Isn't that weird? And denying yourself most occasions for celebration is a great way to kick off a review of this talk by Brother Smith on nostalgia and how, despite its many benefits that I just shared with you from a mental health professional, nostalgia, memories, reminiscing, missing people and things, this too, like everything else in our lives, can be a source of sin for a Jehovah's Witness. Can we just end this now? I'm not kidding. As always, please do not take my word for it or anyone else's. Please go watch and listen to Brother Smith's talk. It's on their website. This whopper of a talk is a whopping 8 minutes and 49 seconds long, leveraging 500 plus seconds to tell Jehovah's Witnesses that they need to stop being nostalgic and tapping into their own memories. As is the case with all things Jehovah's Witnesses, they're telling them in no uncertain terms to surrender their sense of self to them. That is not being dramatic, folks. Watch it and listen for yourself. The message is clear in this little 8-minute, 49-second whopper. Telling someone to not be nostalgic or think back to great memories is a form of surrendering self. It's a form of telling someone how to think and feel. It's a form of mind control. I'm reminded of a quote, "In the egoic state, your sense of self, your identity, is derived from your thinking mind. In other words, what your mind tells you about yourself, the storyline of you, the memories, the expectations, all the thoughts that go through your head continuously, and the emotions that reflect those thoughts, all those things make up your sense of self. End quote. And it's a quote from Eckhart Tolle. I'm sure you recognize his work, The Power of Now. Encouraging people to eliminate their memories is full-blown mind control. Brother Smith starts by reading the verse, and then he says the following. And by the way, I'm going to break this down through his talk, old school style. There's a lot of this lately on this show because the material just keeps coming, and it's important to really identify what's happening here. But he starts with reading Ecclesiastes 7:10, and then he says the following to Jehovah's Witnesses, quote, "Now it is possible that a person who reads this verse, perhaps for the first time, might disagree with this statement." End quote for a moment. Yeah, that would be me. Back to his quote, "For example, based on his own personal experience, an older person," I want to highlight that, "an older person might remember the days when he was younger. He was healthier, he was stronger, his memory was sharp. And now that he is getting older, he is tired and grumpy." Take a look at the governing body, Brother Smith. Back to his quote, "He may say that the former days were better than the present." End quote. And immediately, most of us can see where this talk is going. Team this little talk with the October Jehovah's Witness broadcast and the annual meeting, those two doozies, both of them of which were used as recruitment tools for attracting younger Jehovah's Witnesses to Bethel. They lowered the age to 18 for more of their free labor programs and a lifetime of slavery. And you can see what these guys are doing. They're now going to tell the older Jehovah's Witnesses watching and listening, who at one point were those young ones they wanted to recruit to Bethel and more. They're telling the older ones now to pipe down about the past. Shut up. Including reminders that they know they're tired and maybe even grumpy as they have discovered or come to the conclusion that they've wasted their lives in service to a publishing real estate company in New York. But I believe this talk is much more than that. And taken in context with the other two meetings, the annual meeting and JW Broadcasting, I believe the governing body is not so subtly telling Jehovah's Witnesses to stop thinking or bringing up the past. And for that reason, this talk is chilling to me. They put a guy up there who seems like a warm, fuzzy, soft-spoken brother who just speaks really slowly to get their message across. And I realize that I have the benefit of being free of their mind control. But this talk is overtly disturbing to me, and I don't think it can be overemphasized. As the talk continues, I believe the governing body is getting out front of several issues that are likely happening right back at headquarters in New York. It looks like giving guys facial hair and the ladies slacks just didn't get everyone to shut up. See if you can spot what they're trying to control. Brother Smith continues with this, quote, "Or perhaps we know of someone that had to leave Bethel, or perhaps another form of full-time service, and now they long for the days they served at Bethel." Okay. Or perhaps pioneered or missionary service. Well, what if, another example, we are transferred to a different department at Bethel, and now we are struggling to learn a new assignment or adapt to a different routine. Our overseer is, and he gives this really weird smile, go watch it, just not the same as our former overseer. End quote. Okay. The talk starts strong with a peek behind the curtain. People are bitching back at Bethel about all the changes. And some of them don't like their new assignments. And they really don't like their new overseers. No way, Brother Smith. He continues by saying we might long for better days. We might long for the past. I immediately thought of February 2016, when Jehovah and his son Jesus decided to downsize the worldwide Bethel family. How many know about that event? At that time, they laid off, which is odd considering they're all volunteers anyway, they laid off upwards of 25% of the temple volunteers. Scratch that, of the Bethelites, which meant thousands of Bethelites, including those in their 50s and 60s and had served their entire adult lives at Bethel, were suddenly kicked to the curb and had to leave headquarters. They had to leave. What did that mean for them? Folks, grown adults with zero life experience out in the real world, they had to go find jobs. And they had been working for next to zero money on a stipend, an allowance that they give them. It's really your donated money that didn't even allow for retirement. They didn't put into Social Security because it's a volunteer religious organization. They push these people out into the world to fend for themselves after a lifetime of service in 2016. Into a world that they are told is ruled by Satan, while Jesus watched on from heaven and apparently approved the downsizing. Got to lay some folks off down there, fellas. Let's get them out. It's my belief that more of this may be coming. But the part that is particularly chilling to me is that this is an overt effort to get older people, older Jehovah's Witnesses, to shut their mouths and surrender their memories. As if these same ones haven't been through enough, including Jesus himself, as they're told, moving the goalpost on a regular basis when it comes to things like, I don't know, living forever in a paradise earth, having their perfect health back. That's why they're thinking about it in the old days, and so much more. Resurrections, mansions, pet monkeys. This talk is evidence that the governing body is trying to shut the older people up and to do damage control. You guessed it, the past. They want them to shut up. A past and a generation, if not generations of people that were openly fooled into serving them. And they are now elderly. And they're looking back going, it was so much better back then. And in so doing, they're also laying the groundwork for younger generations of Jehovah's Witnesses to do, guess what? Dismiss the past as they age. A past that includes them predicting the end of the world in the last century that's 24 years gone, that called shunning a sin at one point and then instituted it, that included presidents with mansions and kegger parties during Prohibition, that included millions now living, never dying. A past that had hundreds and hundreds of publications they can no longer read because they're gone, and on it goes. The past. This talk is about them not wanting Jehovah's Witnesses to look back at any of it. His talk emphasizes that they don't want older ones looking back at any of it. And I don't think it's a reach to say they sure as hell don't want them talking about any of it with the younger generations, nostalgia or not. Since when do other flesh and blood men have the right to tell other humans what they can think about, what they can remember, what they can miss about the past? It's incredible that they prop this guy up on a stage and people are clapping along to him telling them, stop thinking about certain things. He goes on with this, quote, well, we might think the former days were better than the present. So what will help us to understand Ecclesiastes 7:10 a little better? Well, let's take our first example example of the older person. He then says, the watchtower, not the Bible, the watchtower from where our text is taken says that older ones who show humility will have a realistic view of the way things were in the past. And quote for a moment, in other words, you're not humble if you don't view it the way I do. He continues, so how does that realistic view help? Well, while we realize many things were better in the past, many things are better now. For example, although a person may have had more energy and strength when they were younger, as you age, you learn to work smarter, not harder. So to make the statement, why were former days better, isn't realistic. End quote. Thank you for telling me how I can feel, Brother Smith. They aren't trying to be subtle anymore. He's telling me if I don't see it the way the guys at the top see it, I'm not only not realistic, and he says it to their faces. He continues with, quote, if we constantly view the past as better, will we be content with the present? It's not likely we will probably live in a constant state of discontent, wishing we could go back in time. But is that realistic? Does it make us any happier? No, it's not wise. End quote. Folks, in this 8-minute plus doozy of a talk, just bank it. Bank it now. More changes are coming. This is a prep talk. More changes are coming. This is an effort to get out front of attitudes and the way people think in their own heads, including those that are likely suffering the most with all the ongoing changes inside Jehovah's Witnesses in 2024. Who is that group? The older Jehovah's Witnesses. Please sit with that for a few minutes. The governing body of this religion is encouraging everyone to give up their past, to forget what happened before, what they saw before, what they heard before, what they did before. These Heavens 11 in upstate New York already control Jehovah's Witness schedules, every detail of their lives, from sex in their own marriages, to grooming, to their career decisions, to their own medical decisions. And now, in this little talk, they're going for their very memories. It's chilling. And it's not new, but when this pops up on the radar like this, it reminds you how chilling it is. And it's very clear to me they don't want Jehovah's Witnesses considering the past. They don't want them reminiscing about their claim that paradise would arrive before the generation of 1914 was gone. They're gone. They don't want them considering how important things like the book study arrangement was when we all attended in people's homes, where we were told how it would be that group, our book study group, that we would lean on and hide together during the Great Tribulation. They don't want them wondering what happened to Toni Morris. They don't want them wondering about it. The list is seriously endless. But it all includes the organization's path, including everything they said that they got from Jesus Christ of the Bible himself. They don't want Jehovah's Witnesses thinking, remembering, or being nostalgic, even for things like those cheese danishes. I'm sorry, they're one of my favorite memories as a kid. Cheese danishes and open-air football stadiums, hanging out with your friends, putting your umbrellas on the arms of the chairs so you didn't get sunburned. The warm Shasta sodas, the really nasty vanilla pudding, trading it for chocolate with your friends, or holding the Bible in your hands. Not a laptop, not a tablet, holding the Bible in your hands and turning its pages. They want them to forget. It's a new era. It's a new era in Jehovah's Witnesses as the rebrand continues. And I'm here to tell you, folks, that while this talk will be a throwaway for most people, most of them won't be listening. It's 8 minutes long. They're probably just holding their pee because they just want to go to the bathroom when it's over. It's serious stuff. From Dr. Malika Marshall of Harvard Health Publishing, we get this, quote, "In many ways, our memories shape who we are. They make up our internal biographies, the stories we tell ourselves about what we've done with our lives. They tell us who we're connected to, who we've touched during our lives, and who has touched us. In short, our memories are crucial to the essence of who we are as human beings." End quote. And I've quoted from this next doctor here before, but author Alexandra Stein, in her book Terror, Love, and Brainwashing, Attachment in Cults and Totalitarian Systems from 2016, said this, quote, "All these scholars agreed that the essence of the process was to isolate victims from their prior connections and destabilize their identity, then consolidate a new submissive identity within a rigidly bound new network. This was achieved by alternating a regime of threats with conditional approval." End quote. Memories are who we are. Looking to the past has immense benefits, as I've shared. The good Dr. Alexander Stein tells us that when people tell you to trash your memories, to not look backwards, to not reminisce, they are overtly trying to destabilize your identity, who you are. See a past episode of the show about losing yourself in this religion. Folks, in what appears to be an 8-minute, 49-second throwaway talk on this website, they are admitting to everyone who watches and listens that they want their souls. I genuinely don't care if anyone thinks that's dramatic anymore, so I'll say it again. These guys want everything. Your soul, your personality, your time, your allegiance, your memories. Brother Smith continues in his talk by saying that Ecclesiastes 7:10 can help us in more, quote, sobering ways. Our 2018 midweek workbook, they never quote the Bible, 2018 midweek workbook had this to say: when we experience difficulties, it's easy to long for the good old days, perhaps the days before we came into the truth. When doing so, we exaggerate the joys and minimize the problems of the past. End quote. Oh no, Brother Smith. Brother Smith. No one is minimizing the problems of the past, including this organization telling everyone to prepare for a genocide and receive their own panda bear when it's over. In the last century. The one that's gone. But you don't want us to bring that up, do you? Right? And before I was in this organization, brother, let me assure you that most Jehovah's Witnesses watching this video or listening to your talk were born into this organization. And they don't even have the benefit of knowing or having memories without your leaders controlling their every move. And as is seen in this talk, their every thought. And then he does something that only stands to prove how absurdly stupid, how unbelievably moronic this organization is. I wanted to reach through the screen and shake this guy. I wanted to shake him until his glasses fell off. You know what he does next? Are you ready? He then proceeds to take every Jehovah's Witness watching and listening. Are you ready for this? You know what he does next? He then takes them by the hand and he leads them into the past. I'm not kidding. Seconds after making several comments about how silly it is and how unrealistic and how you lack humility if you look into the past, He does the only thing Jehovah's Witnesses know how to do. Brother Smith tries to prove that looking into the past is a bad idea, but then he takes the entire audience to look into the past. What does he say next? The only thing these guys know how to do. They take the audience of 2024 back to, I know this is going to shock you, ancient Israel in the Old Testament. Don't look at the past. It's unrealistic. It's not humble. But come with me as we take a look at ancient Israel in the Old Testament. He continues to tell the audience that reminiscing or longing for the past or fond memories, all of it is a very bad idea by doing the very thing he's telling us not to do, by tapping into an ancient story involving the Israelites in the Old Testament. I can't emphasize this enough. The stupidity, the lack of self-awareness. Brother Smith, I wanted to reach through, shake him. Is everything okay? Are you okay? You don't even hear yourself, do you? You're just reading a manuscript they handed you. It's so funny, but it is also so tragic. He doesn't know how to do anything else. He doesn't know. Jehovah's Witnesses don't know. They've been trained to do this. It doesn't matter what the subject is. We're going to tell you not to do it and then prove it by doing it ourselves. Continuing with his words, he says that we tend to remember the good times and minimize the bad times. So walk with Brother Smith and I as he now explains to Jehovah's Witnesses that looking back at the past is a bad idea, to never reminisce, to not spend time on nostalgia by himself, looking back into the past at the ancient Israelites and how they handled, are you ready for this? I know you think Noah's coming. I snuck him in. You think we're going to look at Noah again? Nope. He tells Jehovah's Witnesses and tries to teach them that looking backwards is bad by looking at how the Israelites handled manna. You remember manna, right? Remember manna? And so looking into the past to teach us how bad it is to look into the past, he says, quote, and that is what the Israelites did when they left Egypt, end quote. And I burst out laughing. I couldn't believe it. I could believe it, but I can't believe it. He continues, quote, how did the Israelites do that? Well, the account referred to here is from Numbers chapter 11, verses 5 and 6. And I'm going to read it for you, which says, quote, how fondly we remember the fish that we used to eat without cost in Egypt, also the cucumbers, the watermelons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now we are withering away. We see nothing at all except this manna, end quote. Brother Smith then says, quote, well, through the rose-colored lens of nostalgia, they remembered the fish and the melons and the vegetables, but not the hard slavery that made their lives miserable every single day. So they actually viewed the former days as better. In fact, looking back at the past actually blinded them to what Jehovah was doing for them right then in the present. I think we can see where this is going. Can you? Back to the quote. For example, the manna. The manna appeared every morning, simply out of nowhere, in the middle of the wilderness. The Israelites didn't have to plow the ground. They didn't have to plant any seeds. They didn't have to water. Then he goes on, blah, 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 and continues, evidently the manna was the perfect food and tasty, like an oiled sweet cake. Not bad, end quote. Go watch it. Oh, no. Who wants to tell Brother Smith and all the Jehovah's Witnesses listening the real background of manna? Never mind that he's telling us not to look back while he himself teaches us to not look back by looking back. And never mind that the Israelites were in a wilderness starving. Manna, folks. Who remembers the background of manna and who wants to tell Brother Smith? Well, guess what? You don't have to remember, because after all, we don't want to do any memory stuff. Let's let the faithful and discreet slave tell us in their own words what manna was about. From Insight on the Scriptures, Volume 2, pages 309 to 310, we are told this from the governing body, quote, Jehovah let the Israelites go hungry in the wilderness, end quote. That sounds nice. I mean, I can't imagine why they were then longing for fish, vegetables, watermelons, and leeks. Just a reminder, Jehovah let the Israelites go hungry in the wilderness. Back to the quote, and then furnished manna to teach them that not by bread alone does man live, but by every expression of Jehovah's mouth does man live. Jehovah did this in order to humble them and put them to the test, so as to do them good in their after days, according to Deuteronomy 8. When the Israelites tired of manna and began calling it contemptible bread, Jehovah punished their rebellion by sending poisonous serpents among them, causing the death of many. End quote. Insight on the Scriptures, Volume 2. Wow. Friends, what is your favorite meal? What is your favorite meal? Pizza? Sushi? Spaghetti? What is it? Why would the Israelites in the past, a past we shouldn't be looking at to begin with, be longing for fish, veggies, and fresh watermelon when they wandered in the wilderness because Jehovah made them and he was doing this to test them? What was wrong with these people looking back at fresh food? What an example, Brother Smith. I don't know, but here are a couple of things to consider. Brother Smith forgot to mention a few key details in this story as he encouraged us to look into the past so that we shouldn't be looking into the past now. Here is one small tidbit from the story. I just asked what your favorite food was. Do you have a thought? Can you say it right out loud? Well, now imagine eating that favorite food, whether it's pepperoni pizza or sushi. Imagine eating that every day for 40 years. Imagine eating your favorite food for 40 years. The Israelites were eating manna, the same meal, for 40 years, Brother Smith. 40 years. What could go wrong? Why in the world were these ungrateful people looking back at decent food and variety? Are you sure, Brother Smith? Are you sure you want Jehovah's Witnesses to take this example of the past so that they stop thinking about the past? Are you sure this example's the one you want to use? Not to mention, Jehovah did it to them. How about another point from Brother Smith's nostalgic look at manna? How about the motive behind manna? I've touched on it because I'm off the rails. From Deuteronomy 8:16 of the New World Translation, we're told in this story from the past, quote, and fed you with manna in the wilderness, which your fathers had not known, in order to humble you and to put you to the test so as to benefit you in the future, end quote. The lack of comprehension. You see, Brother Smith and faithful and discreet slave guys, this might not be a good example for this talk. The God of love was feeding them the same bland meal for 40 years after making them wander around in circles in the wilderness. And the motive behind all of this was the God of love was secretly testing them all along by making them eat this manna. And for a God that should know his creation, apparently he didn't realize that humans will eventually start bitching about eating the same food for 40 years. So just like the Garden of Eden, They eventually failed. It was probably 2 weeks in. 2 weeks of eating pizza isn't probably a good idea. They started complaining. Then the God of love, well, he sent serpents to kill them all for complaining about eating his food for 40 years. As they wandered in a wilderness, he made them wander in. This might not be the best example, Brother Smith. You see, the Israelites were just remembering the variety of food. Sure, they minimized that they were slaves in Egypt, only to be led into the wilderness by their loving God Jehovah, wander around, generations of them dying, all while eating some bland, oily cakes, and damn it, they better like them. But they didn't. This entire story had the reverse effect on me because I instantly started missing those cheese danishes from those past district assemblies. Brother Smith and the governing body who handed him this manuscript, this is truly inspiring to me to not think back to the good old days. What great counsel. Thanks for reminding us about the Israelites, manna, human nature, and this loving God and what he was doing to them, testing them. It sure puts a spotlight on Jehovah's personality, covered in a past episode, doesn't it? It starts right in the Garden of Eden. Let's make a tree. Let's make it really attractive. Let's tell them they can look at it, but don't touch. The whole human race suffers. Let's take my chosen people. Let's pull them out of slavery and make them wander around in the wilderness. Let's make them eat the same meal for 40 years. Let's make them want water and make Moses screw up and get water out of a rock. This is an interesting look into Jehovah. I know, and this is all in the past, and I shouldn't be looking at it anyway. For a Jehovah's Witness today to be reminiscing about anything from this organization in the past, I just want to issue this warning. Watch your feet. Jehovah in the past has sent serpents to kill all his people when they start bitching and complaining about things. And there you have the summary of this talk. The governing body wants you to stop looking into the past and bitching about it. There it is. And if they could, and I'm sure they're disappointed, they too would send serpents around to bite and kill all those Jehovah's Witnesses who were saying, I don't know, I saw Jeffrey Jackson lie on the stand. This is a little uncomfortable for me. But Brother Smith doesn't stop there. There is more for him to bleed out of this example from the past. He continues with this, quote, well, manna provided another example that perhaps the Israelites didn't think about. Why are we thinking about it? Never mind. Quote, remember, they never knew when that miraculous cloud was going to lift and the entire camp was going to have to follow that cloud to another location. End quote. Oh boy. You may remember that the cloud in the wilderness for the Israelites was a sign of Jehovah's presence, as if making them wander around, eat the same food, and get killed by snakes wasn't enough. The manna wasn't enough. And Brother Smith's bosses in New York want to remind us about the cloud. Imagine living your entire life looking up into the sky for a cloud. Imagine oversleeping. You're an Israelite. You oversleep and you miss the cloud on the move and you're left behind in the wilderness. You wake up, cloud's gone, and so are millions of people. Which way did they go? It made me think, what happened when it rained and there was a lot of clouds? Which cloud is the one we follow? Did some people follow that cloud over there, but others followed the cloud going the other direction? Did it split them? Did people ID the wrong cloud? Did the cloud have Jehovah's name on it? Was there CGI angels floating around it? What's going on with the cloud? But stop asking. Brother Smith is here going to teach us to stop being nostalgic in 2024. And he's using the example of a cloud that was floating in the sky above ancient Israel. And here is something interesting you might want to note. right back to the Insight on the Scriptures book, Volume 1, pages 483 and 484, the faithful and discreet slaves say this, quote, doubtless, you know you're in trouble when that word pops, doubtless, this cloud was visible from any part of the camp. Well, that sure answered my questions. That cloud or the other cloud? Okay. Marking the camp center, back to the quote. When it rose, Israel prepared to break camp. When it moved, they followed its direction to the next camping place. Although the exact site to set up the camp may not have been selected, let me back up. When it rose, Israel prepared to break camp. I'm sorry. When it moved, they followed its direction to the next camping place. Although the exact site to set up the camp may have been selected with the help of Hobab. Hobab, who had a good knowledge of the land, including watering places and other features necessary to a camp of such tremendous proportions. End quote. Wait a minute. Wait a second. What? Who is Hobab? All this time, I've been propping up my guy Noah, the 500-year virgin who gathered animals, built a ship, got drunk, and all sorts of other things. How did I miss Hobab? Who's Hobab? Did Hobab have a relationship with the cloud? Why hasn't anyone named a modern-day GPS system after this guy Hobab? Screw Siri. Who needs Siri? We need Hobab. It's so much more fun to say. Hobab, give me directions to the store. Hobab, take me here. Did anyone ever catch Hobab drinking? I've got questions. Hell. Is Hobab the reason millions of Israelites wandered in a wilderness in circles for 40 years? They were all following the guy following the cloud? What? Brother Smith, help us here. I promise not to look at the past even though you're making me. Who is Hobab? We just don't know, but I'll tell you this. What an unsung hero. Or maybe a villain. Was Moses leaning over going, hey, Hobab, where are we going next? And Hobab took him in a big circle somewhere in Egypt. What? We're all considering all of this because Brother Smith and his overlords believe that this story, whether it's manna, the clouds, and low-key Hobab, because, maybe the cloud directed him, but maybe it was really Hobab. They believe that this story is going to help Jehovah's Witnesses in 2024 stop thinking about the past. Stop it. And so he continues, quote, can you imagine, even if you did bring some watermelon seeds with you from Egypt and you managed to plant a few and you started watering them and all of a sudden, what happens? The cloud lifts and the whole nation begins to depart. Long before you get to harvest your watermelons. I can't believe this. Well, we can see that manna was a perfect solution in every way. End quote. Brother Smith, Jehovah was testing them. Brother Smith, it was a perfect solution. Jehovah was testing them. And then when they failed the test, as imperfect people do, even perfect people looking at you, Adam and Eve, he sent serpents to kill them. And oddly, these serpents didn't talk to him like they did Adam and Eve. They just bit him and killed him. What? And yet, he continues, and yet, by looking back at the past, the Israelites were blinded by all that Jehovah was doing in the present. End quote. Yeah, they sure were. Jehovah was testing his people. He's loving that way. And when they fail, meet my snake friends. What in the world? I mean, what in the world? This entire talk is a train wreck of epic proportions. In an effort to get mind control over a witness in the 21st century, we're talking about manna, clouds. We don't even understand the story because the whole thing was a test from Jehovah anyway, and then he killed people. And don't forget, We all got introduced to Hobab, a guy that is, man, he is underrated. I'm going to dig into Hobab. He continues in this talk, quote, "So what lessons do we learn from Ecclesiastes 7:10? Well, looking back at what seems to be the good old days produces discontent with the present." See where this is going? And discontent can lead us to feeling ungrateful for all that Jehovah, governing body, is doing for us now. For the Israelites, that ingratitude also led to unfaithfulness and spiritual disaster ultimately. End quote. Yeah, Jehovah lets snakes talk. He also lets them kill his people when they fail to show gratitude for eating that same slice of pizza for 40 years as they wander in a wilderness without water. But none of it makes any sense, except for the fact that we know where all of this is going and the point he's trying to land. We now know what the entire purpose of this video talk is. The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses wants their loyal followers to quit their bitching, to quit asking questions, to be content with anything they tell them to do, to be content with the organization in its present state. Be grateful. We gave you beards and slacks. You don't have to turn in time slips anymore. The governing body is hearing the murmuring of longtime Jehovah's Witnesses, older generations, and they're likely disappointed that they themselves can't send a bunch of serpents to bite and kill them all so they don't have to listen to them. The leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses spends a great deal of time telling their people to obey them without question. And this talk is nothing more than another example of those guys telling their people, 8 million allegedly strong, to be grateful for everything that they're giving them. I mentioned it. They gave him beards. They gave him pants. They gave him no time slips. They lowered the age for free labor. The changes are becoming rapidly. We got country music. We got carts that sing. We got everything. Stop bitching about not going to college. Don't bring it up again. Don't believe me? How about Brother Smith, as he continues in this talk, his application for today? And notice what he quotes to land the point home. He says, quote, "In this regard, note this comment from the Bible." Nope. Scratch that. Quote, "Note this comment from the 2012 Watchtower. It says, although it is not wrong to meditate on the lessons we have learned from past experiences or to savor cherished memories, we need to maintain a balanced, realistic view of the past. Otherwise, we could accentuate our dissatisfaction with our present circumstances." End quote. By the way, he gives no reference for this comment, and I didn't bother to go looking for it. I'm going to take his word for it on this one. Why? Because I know what he's trying to do. The message is crystal clear. The governing body believes bringing up their past and past things from this organization is becoming a problem. And they don't want anyone doing it. I'm sure it's not much of a reach that many inside the organization are dissatisfied with getting old, with being under financial pressure in their old age, or the very morbid and painful reality that they're going to die after all. But don't you dare start thinking back to when we promised you that you would never experience any of those things. Don't bring it up. He continues, quote, "Yes, realistically, some things in the past may have been good, cheese danishes. Perhaps we had better health, but it wasn't perfect health." End quote. Just absurd. A Jehovah's Witness shouldn't think about being younger and vibrant. You've been jamming it down my throat for my entire life. Nope. Don't think about it. Don't even think about when you were young in this organization, because you weren't perfect, so it really isn't that great after all. He then says, quote, Or maybe we had an excellent relationship with our work overseer in the past, end quote. And it's clear right there that something must have blown up regarding job changes inside Bethel. They're getting out front of it. Any of the ex-Bethelites, give me your thoughts. And as a former elder, I've seen this in action before. It could be something as simple as two brothers got into a fight in the factory that everybody witnessed, or a sister told her work overseer to stick it up his ass about something he told her to do, but something went down. Or something's about to go down, and they're getting out front of it. This entire talk, by the time I got done, in under 9 minutes, it gave me the vibes of a typical local needs talk. For the old timers, we remember those. There's some issues, and this is what we think about it. But he continues, quote, "But can any privilege or work relationship that we have now compared to the privileges we are going to enjoy in the future? Not at all," end quote. You sound pretty confident, Brother Smith. You gave it your best shot. I was watching. And there it is. The past is bad. The future? Well, it's all a Jehovah's Witness has. Someday. Everything in the life of a Jehovah's Witness is someday. And it's been that way since the late 1800s, folks. To question it is like the Israelites, ironically of the past, questioning why they have to eat the same meal for 40 years. We know how that ended up for them. Incidentally, has anyone considered how it all ended up for the Israelites when it was all said and done? I'm going to pause there. He used the Israelites as an example, and I've already talked about the many absurd details that popped for me on using this story. But what happened to the Israelites overall as time went on? Ironic? Brother Smith, did you think about that? He then reaches for another quote, not from the Bible, but from their own literature when he says, quote, "As our midweek workbook mentioned, how much better it is to count our present blessings and to focus on our future joys in God's kingdom. And the challenging things we deal with now often refine us and make us better Christians," end quote. That's it. Buck up, little camper. Bite your tongues. Behold the entire timeline in the life of a Jehovah's Witness. We don't want you missing or even considering or being nostalgic or reminiscing about the stuff we gave you in the past that wasn't true. Be happy with the stuff we're giving you today, even when this too proves to be untrue in the future. And keep looking toward the someday that we give you in Watchtower magazine illustrations. We're getting better at those. Everything in between requires your strict obedience. As for the misery you're enduring today in October 2024, well, pretend it's manna. Just pretend it's manna and have a better attitude. See you at the Kingdom Hall this week. Brother Smith concludes this feast of spiritual food by saying the following, quote, "So if we avoid viewing the past through the blurry lens of nostalgia, if we cultivate contentment with the present and we keep our eyes focused on the kingdom and the real life, well, we'll be happier and also more likely to remain faithful. As Ecclesiastes 7:10 reminds us, the better days are not behind us, they're actually just ahead," end quote. We're in our 3rd century of just ahead, folks. And nothing like low-key threatening people. If you're just content with today, that'll help you remain faithful. Because you know what happens when you don't remain faithful? You can forget about serpents coming to bite you. There's fireballs with your name on it. Or an earthquake. You heard this guy correctly. He wants Jehovah's Witnesses to be content with the present, no matter what it is, and not to look through blurry lens of the past, as he said. Even as this organization has videos featured at this very hour discussing, you guessed it, my God, the irony, the organization's past. Even as he closes this talk and says, don't look into the past, you can go on the website and see videos featuring the organization's past. Just go to the video section of the only website powered by Holy Spirit where you can find such great videos like this. An entire video series broken up into multiple episodes called, oh, the irony, Our History in Motion, a deep dive on the organization's past, including one video called 100 Years of Kingdom Proclamation. Not to be missed are two other videos, Remembering the Legacy of Faith from Canadian labor camps and the ultra-encouraging Christian Neutrality in South Korea, History of Faith and Courage. Not to be missed are videos and interviews with Holocaust survivors and so much more. The past. Don't look at the past, watch our videos on the past. Whatever you do, don't glorify the past. You wouldn't want to be like the Israelites, who weren't grateful for wandering in the desert for 40 years as Jehovah low-key was testing them, eating an ancient version of tofu every day. Don't be like those people. But that's not all. I'm sharing primarily because it continues to amuse and confuse me. How about just one more example of how well-fed spiritually Jehovah's Witnesses are today? Are you up for one more reference on nostalgia? See if you notice anything in this reference. From the Watchtower of 2020 in November, page 26, paragraphs 7 and 8, under the aptly titled series, Look Straight Ahead to the Future, the faithful slave does this. Quote, how can we avoid the trap of nostalgia? Are you ready? Quote, consider the example of a sister who began serving at Brooklyn Bethel in 1945. Some years later, she married a fellow Bethelite, and they served there together for many years. However, in the mid-1970s, her husband became ill. She said that when he realized that his death was near, he gave her some good advice to help her cope with widowhood. He said to her, we've had a happy marriage. Many people never experience that. Odd comment for a Jehovah's Witness. Quote, but he also urged her, don't live in the past. Although your memories will continue, time will help you to heal. Don't become bitter and feel sorry for yourself. Be glad you had these joys and blessings. Memories are God's gift to us. Do you not agree that this was good advice? Our sister took these words to heart. She served Jehovah faithfully until her death at the age of 92. Some years earlier, she said, looking back, over 63 years in the full-time service of Jehovah, I can say that mine has truly been a satisfying life. End quote. Did anything stand out to you in this experience? Sure. We could say this sister was always looking to the future, so much so that she served this organization until she was 92 years old. All without, I might add, ever seen the future she hoped for and that she was promised. Ironic? But you likely noticed her husband was concerned that she would live in the past and encouraged her not to do so. In fact, the governing body agrees. They had this experience printed in the Watchtower in 2020 to encourage other Jehovah's Witnesses to avoid what they called the trap of nostalgia. But how do I tell these guys? I had the same problem when I watched Brother Smith, and he was talking about ancient Israel. Did you catch it? Her final comment in this story reads, quote, looking back, end quote. Wait a minute. How can men blessed with Holy Spirit and under the direction of Jesus Christ himself be this clueless? How do they hear themselves? Do they read their own stuff? In 2 paragraphs I just gave you, meant to discourage nostalgia and memories and reminiscing, her husband encouraged it, and missing the past, this dear woman ends her story by telling us that she looks back and she remembers these things fondly, that she had a great life. She reminisces. She looks back at the past. In an article where they're trying to tell us don't get hung up on nostalgia, in a talk where they're telling us we don't want you discussing the past, they give us the past in Israel, and they give us this woman looking back at the past. They can't help themselves. They truly can't help themselves. They're a one-trick pony who often trips themselves up within seconds of making a statement. It's absolutely incredible. And it's an insult to everyone's intelligence everywhere that this is even subject matter. But it's even more insulting to tell us not to look at the past by then telling us to look at the past. And so concludes another plate of wisdom from the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. In a nutshell, they want us to know, quit longing for the better days of the past. They weren't so great. Nothing beats the paradise earth hope we announced in 1935. But this isn't the first time they've served up warnings regarding nostalgia and at the same time made themselves look like uneducated men with zero self-awareness. It's not the first time, folks. But back to the importance of memories. The importance of considering the past, reminiscing our memories, nostalgia. From Harvard University's Science of Learning on Memory and Nostalgia, we get this, quote, "It is an integral part of human cognition, since it allows individuals to recall and draw upon past events to frame their understanding of and behavior within the present. Memory also gives individuals a framework through which to make sense of the present and the future." End quote. So why would Jesus want his people to not look fondly into the past? Isn't his book a collection of the past? Indeed, recalling the past for better or for worse is critical to the present. The Confucius said, quote, "Study the past and you would define the future," end quote. If you are a Jehovah's Witness wondering where you're going in this organization, you only need to look at their past. I want to thank you all for joining me this week. Wherever you may be, I'm going to go put on a little river band reminiscing. Be well.